How to reach a goal. Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. This is a common issue with a lot of us who are entrepreneurs, self-employed. We choose the type of work we do. We have goals. We set goals. Do we always reach them? We always try. This video is about how to keep going. Basically, how to reach a goal. Because obstacles pop up. Obstacles get in our way. This is going to explain how to get around those. Okay? So the first thing to think about when you're pursuing a goal is you're not going to know everything that you need to know to be able to reach the goal. Normally, that's the case. Normally, if you knew everything you needed to get the goal, it kind of wouldn't be a goal. It would be an activity. It would be something you just did because you already knew all the steps. In this case, when you have a goal, you're admitting to yourself, I don't exactly know how to get that right now. It's going to take some effort. It's going to be a work in progress. So the key is to not quit, not give up on yourself while you're pursuing the goal. You have to leave yourself open to learning as you go. Because you're not going to know everything when you start. Again, if you knew everything you needed to reach a goal, it wouldn't be a goal. It would be an action item. It would be something you just did. You have to figure out how to get around obstacles. I'm going to give you some specific examples that I've figured out. Most of the time I figured out, not all the time. I'll explain a couple of cases where I didn't figure out the obstacle. So here's a recent example. We started a project. We spent a lot of time in the beginning. It was a business issue, figuring out how to do it the most cost-efficient way. And we spent enough time on it. We ran the numbers. This is how we're going to proceed. Okay, so we started the project, and what we did not plan on, we started having cost overruns, and two business issues came up, two new obstacles, and one of them was much more serious than the other one. There were legal issues involved. So those obstacles and the cost overruns, we initially had a project plan. We started working on the project, and the cost overruns and these two distractions came up that at some point it's like we're going to have to put the project on hold. Those, a sense of overwhelm comes along. It's like, okay, we've got too many irons in the fire. We're taking on too much here. These other very important business issues, these two other issues that we have to tackle are preventing us from working on the project in the way that we originally planned. So you have to keep going. You can't really quit, okay? If you start down a path of something, you normally know it's going to take time, and you set aside time. Mentally, you say, I know that's going to take time and effort. I'm willing to commit the time and effort. So we could have hired out the remainder of the project to third parties that we had not initially wanted to bring on board. It would have cost a lot more money. It would have been a much bigger loss. So that wasn't a practical option. We could have afforded it easily, but we didn't want to. So we had cost overruns. We had these two other business issues we had to tackle come up, but we decided to finish our original plan for the project. We just said we're going to have to keep going. Unexpected things come up. Those were the obstacles. And you just have to say, I'm going to work around the obstacles. They may not have come up. I mean, it's possible these two business issues would not have come up. We didn't plan on them arising. They just showed up after we started the project. So had those issues not come up, the project would have proceeded with a little bit of a cost overrun. But now, not only was there a cost overrun, the time we had to spend cleaning up the other two business issues made the project drag out longer. But we stuck with it, okay? That's the key, is you say, things might come up, obstacles. How do we work around it? What is the solution? Hire out the remainder of the project or stick to the original plan? Those were the choices, and we chose this. Stick with the original plan. So another thing to think about when you're pursuing a goal, okay? In your life, in all of our lives, there are some things that you never give yourself permission to quit. Because if you think about it, right here, we were giving ourselves permission to quit. We were considering, we've got these two other business issues that are showstoppers we have to solve. We were considering stopping, giving up on the project and hiring it out to someone else. So we were considering quitting here. We didn't quit. We stuck with the original plan. But there are some things in your life that you never give yourself permission to quit. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And when you see these two examples, you're going to realize that they were difficult challenges, and you decided to you basically just pushed through and kept going, even though it was not clear how you were going to solve them. And they're really simple examples. Learning how to tie your shoes. How much of a mystery was that when you're, when you're just a very tiny kid trying to figure out looping things around with your shoestrings? It's a big deal. You don't have the perspective of an older person who's seen a lot more, who's had a lot more experience in life. Learning to tie your shoes takes time. Your parents show you one time and you try it, and then you can't do it. And you have to keep after it. And at some point you say, I give up. I don't want to do it. It's frustrating. And you quit. And you give yourself room to quit for a while. But then you realize, I have to learn how to do this. I've got to be able to tie my shoes. There's something that just kicks in and says, it's something I have to do. And then you actually do it. You actually push through the frustration. It's like walking through a jungle blindfolded. It's dark. You can't figure out where you're going. But if you keep going, you will make progress. And tying your shoes is one of those things. Learning how to ride a bike is another thing. We all fall down off the bicycle. Very few of us get on a bicycle and have perfect balance, even if you had a bicycle with training wheels. If you have children and you've gotten them a bicycle with training wheels, they get to the point where you say, they're fine with the training wheels. They look like they don't need them. You take the training wheels off and what happens? They fall over. They crash, right? It's very frustrating, and there are injuries involved. As if it's not bad enough they're falling down and frustrated, they're also getting injured. So that's kind of a big deal. So when you were that young, learning to ride the bike and getting injured, you just decided, I'm going to quit for a while. This is not fun. I don't see the point of the bicycle. I don't understand what the point is. It's unpleasant. I'm going to stop. Then you see a bunch of other people with bicycles, or you see a bunch of other people with successful careers. You see other people who have gotten past obstacles, and you know they've gotten past obstacles because you've had to tackle some of those yourself in business. In the case of learning to ride a bike, you're surrounded by all your friends at that age who are riding their bikes without any problem. And you realize, I have to keep going. And you force yourself to keep going. Tying your shoes, riding the bike. At some point, both of those activities were very frustrating, and you may have quit trying for a while. There's nothing wrong with that. It allows you to collect yourself a little bit. Don't allow yourself too much time. If you have a business obstacle like we did, we almost quit. We almost decided to hire out the remainder of the project. It would have cost us more money. But it got to the point where it was very frustrating. We were falling behind. We had cost overruns. We had these other two important business issues, but we stuck with it. It's the same thing with learning to tie your shoes or learning to ride a bike. You just say to yourself, the end goal, that thing that I want, I still want it. I definitely still want it. And I don't know how to make further progress with what I'm doing. I'm just going to keep banging away at it until I figure it out. And then at some point, in the case of the bicycle, you figure out the balancing. You might fall down one or two more times, and then one day you realize, I have figured out how to stay up on the bicycle without falling. Okay? It's kind of a breakthrough. The same thing happens in business. You just never quit. You figure out the obstacle. In the case of the bicycle, it's balance. In the case of tying your shoes, it's being slow and deliberate and thinking about the loops and not rushing and being very deliberate about making sure you're making the loops in the right way, the way your parents showed you. It's being patient with yourself and saying no to getting frustrated and getting all worked up about it and saying, I'm not going to let myself get excited. I'm going to be deliberate and patient and just keep going, even though it's not clear what the next step should be. Another thing to think about is if you decide to quit, you're just going to have to start over with something else, right? Because if you decide to give up something, you know yourself well enough that you're going to take on something else new at some point, and you just have to start this whole thing all over again. What if you had decided, I give up trying to tie my shoes? I quit. I'm not going to do the shoe tying thing. Okay, imagine being an 18-year-old and not knowing how to tie your shoes. Okay, that's not going to work. It's not possible. You had to do it. So when you do give up on yourself, when you give yourself permission to quit because you're unhappy, you lose all the time you've already spent. Here's an example. In our case, the first rental property we bought, I couldn't fit everything on the board. We bought a 9-unit apartment building from the bank. I was a software engineer, very recently out of college. I think I was 2 years out of college. My wife was also 2 years out of college. We were both working normal jobs. I was a software engineer working at a software startup. This was in Silicon Valley. And my boss hated my guts for buying that 9-unit apartment building. He did not know anything about running apartment buildings. I didn't either. I didn't even know what a finish nail was. A finishing nail is something you use to nail in baseboards, for example. They're really skinny, polished nails with a very small head, so that they can't be seen that easily. Normal nails have a large head and then a long shaft. Finishing nails are designed to attach baseboards to the bottom of the walls. I didn't even know what finishing nails were. I was not familiar with electric drills. I didn't know how to install a faucet in a bathroom sink. I had zero experience with anything related to home ownership. We were still renters, so we were totally out of our depth. There were several points along the way where things came up like bad tenants. We had a fire in the electric panel. We had a lot of things that came up. We had a roof issue at one point. We got introduced to code enforcement. We didn't even know that existed. Code enforcement basically enforces things about property to make sure it's up to standards, the city's rules and laws. So we had a very steep learning curve. And meanwhile, I'm working at a software startup writing software to ungodly hours. Software jobs are very time intensive. It's not a 9 to 5, 40-hour a week job. It can be 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. And the payoff is you get IPO stock, you get pre-IPO stock. And I actually did, and that worked out. But the point is the desire to quit. We just figured we are in over our heads with this. This is a 9-unit apartment building. We don't know how to figure out which tenants to rent to. In terms of maintaining the property, who do we call? Who can we trust? We had a lot of issues with people we tried to hire who were shady and ripped us off. Steep learning curve. We stuck with it. So over time, that willingness to stick with that earned us millions of dollars in income and net worth. Millions of dollars. That one commitment to say we screwed up here buying this. We are very busy with our careers. We're new in our careers. I'm a software engineer, very busy at the startup. My wife is quite busy in her job. But we had the income from our jobs to help us get over mistakes. And that's one thing that's very important is when you decide to take something on, make sure you don't set yourself up to run out of cash, because that can lead to panic, and panic can lead to bad decisions. So, and you also want to have at least a 12-month commitment, because there's very few things you can make progress in less than a year. Most things take at least a year. If you're trying to learn how to play guitar, a year is essential. Most things in life will take a year. So, this apartment property we bought, we stuck with it. It was very challenging. We wanted to quit. When the fire erupted in the electric panel, big deal. The fire department was there. People were without power. Huge deal. But if you quit, you just have to start over with something else tomorrow, right? So you've already invested a lot of time. You should stick with it. Committing 12 months to your original plan is essential. You should have an initial plan A for the 12 months. Have a plan B in case things go wrong. Hopefully you'll never need those options, the plan B options. Personally, I've been involved in a lot of startups, and we did not give ourselves enough time. There's one example in particular, okay? We had a two-sided marketplace startup. A two-sided marketplace is like Amazon, where sellers post things for sale and buyers go. So in other words, sellers use Amazon to post things for sale. Buyers, the other side of the two-sided market, go to Amazon to buy. It's a buy and sell thing. Amazon is a website. It's a two-sided marketplace. There are sellers and there are buyers. So we had a two-sided marketplace. We started. It was fairly early in internet days. Learning how to make a web server operate successfully and get traffic, we were relying a lot on our hosting provider. Our hosting provider had a lot of knowledge about it, and they were helping us. And then they went under, and we lost that support. And that was a big shock. That was a key part of our being able to rely on them for support when we needed it, and then having it go away. That was a big deal. And we actually walked away from it. We had spent a fortune on advertising, and we walked away from it. So what we should have done, we could have brought somebody on who understood web servers onto the startup, and or found a better hosting provider, or sell the business instead of just shutting it down. So there have been times when I've actually given myself permission to quit, and I regret it. After I've the times that I've given up, I've said, that was an obstacle, and I decided not to figure out how to get around it. I gave myself permission to quit. And if I had done that with this property, the millions I've earned from rental property, I would not have earned. I would have gotten frustrated with that first property and said, this sucks, I quit, and never gone back to it. Millions of dollars not earned. So that would have been a huge mistake. You should nail the why you're doing something. If you're doing something to get rich, despite what you've heard, I think that's a rational goal. Because when you become wealthy, you can take care of yourself and you can take care of your family. And you can choose what you do for work. So a lot of people say you should not have getting wealthy as a goal. Bullshit. I think you should. If you especially if you come from meager beginnings. Especially if you didn't grow up in a family with wealth, it's a natural desire to want to get past that and to have abundance. It's a reasonable goal. And of course, you've got to do something that people will pay for. You've got to produce something that people want and need, preferably need. So in Elon Musk's case, for example, nailing the why you're starting something, if it's to get wealthy, there's nothing wrong with that. If you think about Elon Musk with PayPal, a software startup, he took the PayPal money and invested it in two totally different, heavily industrial companies, a car manufacturer and a rocket a company that launches rockets. That's pretty far away from software. Okay, I have to tell you, if you're a software person and you've just made like 180 million selling your share of PayPal, which was a payment provider that still exists today, the first thought in your mind would not be to buy an automobile manufacturing company. It's very different from software. Okay, there are some things in common. There's engineering involved, but that's a pretty radical departure. So in his case, in 2008, Tesla was losing $10 million a month. In 2008, that was a great financial crisis. Tesla almost went under. Elon Musk said, this is nailing the why you got into this in the first place. In Elon Musk's case, it surely could not have been to come up with cool software, right? He had a software background. But he said, in late 2008, I gave Tesla the last money I had. It was either that or the company would have died. So nailing the why will help you not quit. He burned through the majority of his wealth, and I think he's the richest person on the planet. Had he quit, if he had not understood his why, had he quit in 2008, like a lot of people did, a lot of people folded in 2008. It gets frustrating when business conditions are poor to find a reason to keep dumping money into something like he did. He had $180 million when he sold PayPal, and he says that he had the vast majority of that he spent on SpaceX and on Tesla. You know, that's huge risk taking, because 180 million, most people would say I'm set for life. I don't have to do anything else. All I have to do is invest this nest egg and live off the dividends and the interest, right? And instead, he decided to risk all of that. And in 2008 there, he doubled down and he said that he gave the vast majority of his wealth. He invested almost all of it into SpaceX and Tesla. So nailing your why as to why you got into something to begin with will help you keep going when things are a little bit challenging. Right now, business conditions in different parts of our economy, business conditions are challenging. So if you're one of those people, that's one of the reasons I wanted to make this video, how to reach a goal, is to not quit. You had an original idea. Why did you get into this to begin with? Rethink that. Try to remember why you originally decided to start down the path. And having to take another job to have another source of income to help you make it through, there's nothing wrong with that. Bringing other people into the venture like we could have done with our two-sided marketplace to carry some of the load. And yes, maybe you give up some ownership, but you can keep going. The whole idea is to not fold and walk away. Because if you quit, you're just going to have to start over with something else. If you know yourself, you know for a fact that you're going to try something else, right? So figuring out what the obstacle is, learning those problem-solving skills. There's an obstacle. How do I get around that? In the case of learning to tie your shoes, it's a mystery. How am I going to figure this out? When you're a 1 or a 2-year-old, how am I going to figure out how to tie my shoes? You don't know. You just keep trying, and eventually you get it. You ask for help from your parents or other people, which is what you should do when you're running a business. If you're running a business, one of the most important things you can do is ask other people, if you were me, how would you do this? How would you go about this? Because you never know an idea you can get from someone else. And I don't mean artificial intelligence. I don't mean asking AI. I'm talking about real live people. Ask as many people as you can, how would you do this if you were me? And maybe the majority of the feedback you get will not help. But 1 or 2 ideas could be things you would have never thought of and will get you over the hump around the obstacle. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, I've got a lot of experience starting things. I've got a little bit of experience quitting things too soon. And it all came down to giving myself permission to quit. I gave myself permission to quit. That's a mistake. Because I was too lazy, intellectually lazy, or maybe emotionally lazy to figure out the obstacle and how to get around it. So please post questions in the comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. And I really want to thank everyone for watching. Have a great day.